For many builders, wedges in Conan can be a death trap. You might know exactly how the square pieces work, but as soon as you slide a wedge in there, it all falls apart. Today I'm going to help you avoid the pitfalls of wedges by showing you exactly how they work, and some easy solutions to the most common problems. When it comes to wedges, they can introduce some serious issues to your build. That's because wedges are at a 60-degree angle, which isn't quite enough to transfer equally into right angles, leaving you with an awkward space change that can quickly spiral out of control if you don't handle it properly. Carelessly throwing in even 1 or 2 wedges can cause catastrophic issues, ones I've encountered many times before, preventing you from building roofs, closing unsightly gaps in the walls, and so on. So, how can we avoid these problems? Before that, quick shameless self-promo, consider checking out my content over on Patreon where you can get videos early, or just join for free to see video previews and exclusive updates on the upcoming Settlers Season 4. Plug over, let's tackle these wedges. The first, and honestly easiest to understand way to use wedges is mirroring. This is the pretty strict rule that any symmetrical build will require any wedge or square placements to be mirrored on both sides to ensure full enclosure. Take this base plate for example. It looks a bit complicated, but if we break it into rows you can see that I've mirrored my placements on the bottom and top until they reach a natural join point where I've just placed the necessary blocks. Because you're introducing an awkward spacing change, you need to ensure that change is mirrored on all sides to keep things connected, else you'll end up with small seams and cracks where the base plate isn't properly connected, which then has a knock-on effect to the rest of the design. Fortunately, mirroring is really quite easy. Say you build something like this, as you continue to place pieces and mirror them, you'll begin to see slots appearing where you can only fit wedges or squares, which helps to guide you to the proper conclusion. I would say this is probably the most common issue I see with wedges, and mirroring them is often the key to solve a lot of entry-level issues when building with these pieces, but it's one of those tips that never loses its utility, regardless of if you made one build with wedges or 1,000. One other thing I do see a lot of people struggle with at first is getting round baseplate designs. I won't spend a ton of time on this, it's pretty low level, but the rule for these is pretty simple. Start off with a circle of 6 wedges and then draw out the next line as so, then the next line, then the next, ad infinitum. The format is fairly simple, squares connect to the outer edge of wedges and vice versa. You can also lay out circle builds like this, though I wouldn't recommend it personally. I find it loses a lot of the ease of use that the previous format has. There's also this layout. I'm personally not a huge fan of it. It can cause some pretty severe stability problems, but for some designs it can work. Personally, I'd always go with the first design. You can use this for towers, roundhouses, or other structures, and if you want it as an oval or something like that, just extend out the central wedge section like so. Also do keep in mind when using wedges that they do tend to use more stability than ceilings to cover less ground, so you will have to be quite aware of your stability usage. Our third tip is really important. Vertical transfer is one of the easiest mistakes to make with wedges, and unfortunately it is quite common. The shape of your base plate will dictate the shape of the rest of your build, but that becomes even more important when wedges are added into the equation. In 99% of cases, what you have on the base will translate all the way up. That means, say you're building the first floor, you need to copy the shape layout on the ground to keep things working correctly, even if you have stuff like balconies or roofing. On the topic of roofing, the same is true there. Your roof pieces should reflect the tiles below it. For example, say you have a layout like this. Your straight roof pieces go over the square tiles, but over your wedges, you use the correct wedge piece and everything will form together nicely with no gaps. Vertical transfer is a really important part of using wedges, especially when it comes to roofing. It's one of the big stumbling blocks of using wedges, and to be fair, I struggled with it for a fair while. I think some of my early builds you can actively see me struggling with this, but don't go back and watch those, they're probably really bad. Regardless, make sure you always transfer the same shapes of your foundations, ceilings, etc. vertically. It will be the perfect logic for 99.99% of builds. Finally, let's talk briefly about something nice you can do with wedges that is basically a worry-free process. Wedges are great for attachments or accents that you can just slap onto a build for a bit of shape variety. This can be in the form of conservatories, bay windows, or supportive structures like buttresses. Treat it like a small separate building or structure being attached to the core shape of your base, and it will prove to be a nice and incredibly easy addition, one that often takes a small amount of effort but can have quite a big impact on the design. Wedges are, generally speaking, pretty tough to get a hang of when you start building. They look simple enough but can introduce a lot of unwanted problems if you're not careful. I've given you some basic tips that helped me out in the early stages of building, tips that should make wedges much easier to use. If you have any questions about these methods or things I didn't cover here, do leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to answer as many as I can. Anyway, that will about wrap us up for today. Thanks for watching, and a massive thanks to our wonderful, esteemed coffee cultists for continuing to support the channel over on Patreon. If you want to support the channel here on YouTube and get some exclusive perks, take a look at the new channel memberships available by clicking join just below this video. Take care, and I'll see you soon.